The camera glides over ancient desert sands as a haunting wind howls across the dunes. Edward, the seeker of truth, said, "History is more than carved stones. It breathes with questions." His eyes scanned the vast ruins scattered like forgotten bones of a civilization. Dr. Clark, the reluctant ally, said, "You chase myths, Edward, but myths consume men before they reveal meaning." Edward pressed forward, his voice firm. "Every silence has its story, and I will tear the silence apart." The ruins trembled under the weight of centuries, and the desert sun painted them in burning gold. Edward felt the burden of secrets, yet his heart pushed him deeper. A shadow passed, and Eleanor, the mysterious outsider, whispered, "What you seek waits, but it devours truth-seekers." The keeper of secrets lingered in silence, his presence unseen yet palpable, as if the ruins guarded him. Edward stood tall, saying, "If the truth burns me, I will still uncover its flame." His voice echoed into the hollow chambers, where dust danced like spirits. The scene closed with a chilling resonance. An ancient secret waiting to be born into light. Edward stepped deeper into the ruins, his hand grazing the stone walls etched with forgotten carvings. Edward said, "Every mark here is a voice from the past." Clark frowned, muttering, or a warning written in silence. The air grew heavier, pressing down as though the ruins themselves resisted intrusion. Eleanor's voice came like a whisper, "The desert does not guard without reason." Edward looked back, fire in his eyes, saying, "If reason lies buried, then I will unearth it, no matter the cost." Clark exhaled sharply, his doubt rising, yet his feet betrayed his mind as he followed. The keeper's presence seemed to linger in the dark corridors, though no figure stood visible. Dust fell from above as Edward's lantern flickered, casting long, distorted shadows. Eleanor's eyes glistened, unreadable, her expression holding secrets of her own. The deeper they went, the more the silence echoed with voices untold, pressing them into the weight of unseen eyes watching. The chamber widened into a hall where broken pillars reached like fractured memories of gods. Edward whispered, "These stones hold stories beyond our books." Clark rubbed his forehead, saying, "Or madness, Edward, only madness." The lantern light revealed patterns, winding into spirals across the ceiling. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her lips parted slightly, as if decoding something only she could see. Edward touched the wall, fingers trembling as though he felt a pulse beneath the carvings. He said, "This is not myth, it is memory carved in stone." Clark stepped back uneasily, muttering, "Memory can be twisted." Shadows pooled into the corners, and the silence deepened, broken only by faint echoes of wind. The keeper's invisible weight pressed down, though he was nowhere seen. Eleanor tilted her head, whispering, "The silence is alive." The lantern flickered, as if the flames resisted the chamber. Edward said, "It is as though the stones themselves reject our presence." Clark shook his head, whispering, "Or perhaps they long to stay undisturbed." A sudden gust rushed through the cracks, carrying dust that stung their eyes. Eleanor covered her face briefly, then smiled faintly, whispering, "The ruins breathe when they are remembered." Edward pressed forward, each step echoing against stone, as though the hall mocked his determination. Clark groaned, "Edward, this road leads only into shadow." Edward replied, "Then it is shadow that hides the truth." The unseen keeper of secrets seemed to tighten his hold, pressing their chests with silent weight. Eleanor's faint laugh broke the moment, haunting as she said, "Every truth asks for a price." The group reached a chamber where a broken statue lay scattered across the floor. Edward knelt beside it, brushing dust from its carved face. He said, "This is no idol, it is a memory preserved in stone." Clark stood stiffly, muttering, "Or a warning left for fools who refuse to listen." Eleanor's expression darkened, her eyes sharp as she said, "Warnings often hide keys." Edward's hands trembled as he uncovered a symbol hidden at the base of the broken statue. The symbol glowed faintly in the lantern light, as though awakened. Clark stepped back in fear, whispering, "This is not natural." Edward smiled grimly, saying, "No, it is not natural, it is truth bleeding through." Eleanor leaned closer, her robe brushing the stone, her voice soft. The ruins speak, Edward, but will you survive their voice? The desert sun gave way to twilight as Edward led Clark and Eleanor toward a campfire burning weakly against the encroaching night. Edward said, "Every journey into mystery begins with firelight and doubt." Clark sat heavily on a stone, muttering, "and ends with bones buried beneath the sands." The shadows danced across their faces, the flames licking upward, as though eager to swallow their words. Eleanor gazed into the distance, her voice low. The horizon hides more than the sky. It hides the watchers who guard the secrets. Edward's jaw tightened, saying, "Then let them watch. I have no fear of shadows." Clark's voice trembled. "You should, Edward. Shadows live longer than men." The desert wind howled suddenly, scattering embers upward, glowing like fleeting stars. Edward rose to his feet, determined, his words cutting sharp. "Tomorrow, the ruins will answer. Tonight we prepare." Eleanor's expression softened, yet her eyes burned with hidden fire. Clark wrapped his arms around himself, shivering though the flames burned hot. Morning rose harsh and golden as the caravan of camels shuffled forward, their silhouettes etched against endless dunes. Edward strode confidently at the lead, his voice ringing, "The truth waits in hidden sands." Clark trudged behind, sweat glistening, grumbling, "Or death waits faster than truth." Eleanor walked with quiet grace, her robe trailing lightly, whispering, "The desert is a veil, it gives and takes at its will." Edward stopped briefly, turning back with fire in his eyes. "I will lift every veil until nothing remains." Clark groaned, "And what if beneath the veil lies only madness?" Edward's voice rose, "Then I will claim madness as truth." The sun beat down mercilessly, and heat rippled in waves across the horizon. Eleanor shielded her eyes, murmuring, "The path you take is chosen by the ruins themselves." Edward clenched his fists, determined, each step carrying him deeper into the desert's trial. They reached a plateau where jagged stones jutted like broken teeth from the earth. Edward ran his hands across one, whispering, "These stones speak older than history." Clark shivered, muttering, "Stones speak only in silence, Edward." Eleanor traced a finger across a spiral carving, her lips parting as if she heard something only she could understand. She said softly, "They remember." Edward turned sharply, eyes gleaming. "Yes, they remember everything." Clark raised his voice, shaking, "And memory kills when men trespass upon it." Edward crouched near a fragment, glowing faintly in sunlight, saying, "Then let memory kill me, if that is the price for truth." The wind shrieked across the plateau, carrying grains that stung their faces. Eleanor closed her eyes, whispering, "The wind carries voices, if you dare to listen." Clark stepped back, heart pounding, his fear written plainly in his trembling hands. As dusk settled, the group entered a narrow canyon, its walls painted crimson by the dying sun. Edward whispered, "This path feels carved with intent." Clark muttered, "Or carved by centuries of storms, nothing more." Eleanor paused, her eyes fixed upward at symbols etched faintly into stone. "Storms cannot carve language, Clark." Edward pressed forward, his lantern flickering alive as darkness consumed the canyon. He said firmly, "Every mark is a testimony that truth fought to survive." Clark's shoulders slumped as he murmured, "And truth buried in stone is better left there." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her voice a sharp echo, "Not all truths are meant for sleep." The air thickened, the canyon breathing with unseen force. Edward's steps echoed loudly, as though another walked with them unseen. Clark shuddered, whispering, "Someone follows." Edward stopped, fire burning in his words, "Then let them follow into revelation." Night enveloped the canyon as they reached a hidden chamber carved deep within. Edward's lantern revealed walls thick with spirals and celestial patterns. Edward said, "This is not man's hand, it is something greater." Clark's voice cracked, or the hand of madness shaping rocks into illusions. Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes shimmering, whispering, "The stars themselves left their mark here." Edward clenched the lantern tighter, his voice rising, "At last, proof waits to be uncovered." Clark fell to his knees, muttering, "No proof is worth our lives." Eleanor leaned closer to Edward, her voice sharp but calm. "Truth never comes without costs." The shadows thickened in the chamber, and though unseen, the keeper of secrets seemed to breathe through the walls. Edward smiled grimly, whispering, "Then I will pay the cost gladly." The room pulsed with an eerie hum, as if alive with memory. The hidden chamber stretched wider, revealing walls etched with constellations that shimmered faintly in lantern light. Edward said, "These stars are maps, guides carved by ancient hands." Clark swallowed hard, muttering, "Or hallucinations born from dust and fear." Eleanor tilted her head, eyes narrowed as she traced a finger along a glowing spiral. She whispered, "The markings align with the heavens above. Someone wanted us to follow." Edward's voice hardened, "And I will follow until the last truth is revealed." Clark groaned, his voice breaking. "Truth is never worth dying for, Edward." Edward turned sharply, his face carved in firelight. "Then stay behind, but I move forward." The silence deepened, vibrating as though the chamber itself resented their intrusion. Eleanor's smile flickered, shadowed and unreadable, as her eyes glistened with cryptic certainty. As the group pressed deeper, they reached a fractured altar carved from obsidian stone, pulsing faintly with blue light. Edward whispered, "This altar breathes, alive with memory." Clark stepped back, muttering, "Stones do not breathe, Edward. Men imagine life where there is none." Eleanor knelt near the altar, her voice low. "Not life. Echoes. They echo across centuries." Edward's hands trembled as he placed his palm against the cold stone, saying, "Every echo is a truth left behind." Clark shook his head, his eyes wide, or a lie written by desperate hands. The chamber thrummed, humming like a distant storm beneath their feet. Eleanor's gaze burned, her tone sharp. "Not lies. Warnings." Edward's voice rose, fierce. "Then I will heed the warning, not fear it." Clark groaned and turned his head away, unable to face what his heart refused to accept. The altar's glow flickered, casting shadows across the walls that twisted into forms resembling figures. Edward said, "They are watchers, guardians of what was left behind." Clark clutched his chest, whispering, "They are illusions born of firelight." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice steady. "Illusions do not breathe. Listen." The chamber filled with a faint whisper, a language lost in time yet alive in the stone. Edward's jaw clenched, whispering, "They want us to remember." Clark shouted, "They want us to leave." His voice cracked under the echo, swallowed by the chamber. Edward turned to him, fire in his eyes. "Fear will never unearth truth, Clark." Eleanor tilted her head, almost smiling, but fear protects fools who rush toward shadows. The whispers grew louder, humming like a chorus pressing against their minds. Clark staggered, gripping the wall, sweat pouring down his brow. They followed the whispers into a narrow tunnel where the walls closed tight, pressing them with suffocating weight. Edward whispered, "This path was meant to be hidden." Clark groaned, "And hidden paths should remain untouched." Eleanor brushed her hand along the stone, her voice low. "No wall holds forever, even secrets erode." Edward pressed on, his lantern flickering, shadows stretching behind him like claws. He said, "I will not turn back. The truth breathes in these depths." Clark shook his head violently, muttering, "Then it breathes poison." Eleanor's eyes gleamed, her lips curving into a faint, cryptic smile. She whispered, "The poison and the cure lie in the same place." The tunnel narrowed further until they nearly brushed shoulders with stone. Edward's determination carved the silence, his steps sharp, echoing defiance in the choking dark. The tunnel burst open into a circular chamber, with a dome overhead carved to resemble the night sky. Stars gleamed faintly, as light reflected from unknown crystals embedded in the stone. Edward gazed upward in awe, whispering, "This is the sky as they saw it." Clark's eyes widened, his voice trembling. "No man could carve this." Eleanor's lips parted, her voice sharp. "Perhaps no man did." Edward walked toward the center, where a spiral marked the floor. He said, "Every line points toward something greater." Clark stumbled back, muttering, "This chamber is wrong. It feels alive." Eleanor's tone cut through the silence, alive because it remembers. Edward knelt, brushing dust from the spiral's center, his voice heavy, "Then let it remember me as the one who uncovered it." Clark turned away, pale with terror, his breath ragged. The chamber pulsed faintly as if breathing with them. The circular chamber seemed to whisper in shifting echoes, but Edward ignored them, kneeling before the spiral. Edward said, "Every line is a map to knowledge long buried." Clark muttered, "Or a trap meant to ensnare the proud." Eleanor tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Maps always lead somewhere, though not always where you expect." Edward brushed the spiral harder, determined to uncover more, but the stone pulsed beneath his touch like a living heartbeat. Clark staggered backward, gasping, "It is alive, Edward. Leave it." Edward's eyes flashed. "Alive or not, it speaks, and I will listen." Eleanor's tone sharpened, almost teasing, "Careful. Truth has many voices, and not all wish to be heard." Clark trembled, his fears swelling into anger. "You both speak madness." Edward rose, towering above them, defiant in firelit glow. "Then let madness guide me, if it opens what silence hides." The walls hummed deeper, shadows stretching into shapes resembling unseen watchers. Later that night, the group sat in tense silence near their fire at the canyon's edge. Edward's eyes burned with restless thought as he whispered, "The chamber is a key." Clark's voice was sharp, "A key to ruin." Eleanor stirred the fire with a stick, her gaze unreadable. "Keys are dangerous when you do not know which doors they unlock." Edward clenched his fists, saying, "Every door leads closer to truth." Clark spat bitterly, "Or to death quicker than you expect." Eleanor smiled faintly, her eyes catching the flames. "Perhaps death and truth are twins." Edward's jaw tightened. "Then I will embrace both if I must." Clark glared, his fear hardening into hostility. "Your obsession will bury us all." Edward shot back, "Fear buries men before stones ever do." The fire crackled loudly, sparks rising like fleeting stars, while the desert wind whispered, a warning neither man wished to hear. The next morning, they discovered new carvings etched along the canyon wall, symbols that had not been visible before. Edward said, "The ruins reveal themselves when they choose." Clark growled, "Or your eyes invent what isn't there." Eleanor traced one of the markings, whispering, "No, these were hidden until the night passed." Edward leaned closer, his voice sharp, "The canyon shifts with memory. It guides us." Clark shouted, his patience broken, "Guides us into graves, Edward." Edward turned with fire, "Better graves filled with truth than lives filled with blindness." Eleanor's eyes flickered, and her tone dripped like honey hiding venom, "And perhaps both graves and blindness wait ahead, side by side." Clark rubbed his temples, shaking, "I will not follow this madness much longer." Edward's voice grew iron, "Then do not follow me, but I will not stop." The canyon air thickened, humming faintly as though the stone itself approved. Deeper into the canyon, they stumbled upon another figure, Daniel, the hidden enemy, stepping from the shadows with a calm smile. Daniel said, "I see you found what others could not." Edward's eyes narrowed. "And what do you seek here?" Daniel's smile deepened. "The same as you. Truth hidden in stone." Clark's eyes flared. "Then help us stop this madness." Daniel chuckled softly. "Or perhaps I should help Edward push further." Eleanor's eyes glistened, measuring him, her voice cool. "And whose side are you really on, Daniel?" Edward said firmly, "Truth has no side, only seekers and cowards." Daniel tilted his head, amused, "And sometimes deceivers who hide what others cannot handle." Clark muttered bitterly, "Deception is all this desert gives." Edward stepped closer, fire burning. "Then I will burn through deception as well." The canyon wind roared, dust swirling violently as though stirred by their confrontation. That night, mistrust coiled tightly among them like a serpent. Edward sat apart, staring at his journal filled with rough sketches of spirals. Edward said, "Every mark leads closer to the answer." Clark muttered from across the fire, "Every mark leads deeper into despair." Eleanor leaned near Daniel, whispering softly, "He drives himself into ruin." Daniel's smile was smooth, his tone low, "And I will guide him into it." Edward glanced up briefly, suspicion flashing across his eyes. He whispered, "Every silence around me speaks louder than words." Clark huffed, "Then listen, Edward." The silent screams stop. Edward clenched his jaw, muttering, "I cannot stop. Not until the last truth breathes." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable, as her gaze flicked between Edward and Daniel. Daniel's smile did not falter, his eyes cold beneath firelight. The night deepened, stars vanishing behind drifting clouds, as if hiding from what was to come. The night bled into silence, but Edward's lantern revealed a chamber filled with broken relics and shattered masks. Edward whispered, "Every piece tells a story of betrayal." Clark muttered, "Or stories we should not wake." Eleanor traced her fingers across a fragment, her voice heavy, "The past is not dead, it bleeds still." Daniel's smile flickered in firelight, sly and calm. "Perhaps the past bleeds because we cut it open." Edward snapped, "No, it bleeds because it was silenced." Clark's voice cracked, "And silence is safer." Edward stood taller, defiance burning in his tone. "Not for me. I will drag the truth out." The chamber seemed to tremble, dust raining down like tears from stone. Eleanor whispered, "Truth has teeth, Edward, and it bites the hand that feeds it." Edward answered with steel, "Then let it bite, for I will not let go." The group stumbled upon a skeleton half buried beneath rubble, its hand clutching a cracked tablet of stone. Edward knelt beside it, whispering, "A victim of silence, left to rot in shadow." Clark recoiled, muttering, "A warning carved in flesh." Eleanor's voice softened, her gaze sorrowful. "No, a soul who carried truth too far." Daniel's eyes gleamed as he stepped closer. "And a soul who failed, Edward. Failure is the price of arrogance." Edward snarled, "No, failure is silence itself." Clark hissed, "Do you not see? This will be us if you do not stop." Edward touched the tablet gently, his voice steady, "Then let me be remembered as one who dared to hold truth, not bury it." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, whispering, "He carried their burden. Now it becomes yours." Daniel's smirk lingered, his expression unreadable, as the chamber groaned with echoes of the forgotten. The tablet glowed faintly as Edward lifted it, symbols etched deep across its surface. Edward whispered, "This is the key, a voice of the lost." Clark's voice broke, "Put it down before it kills us." Eleanor's eyes widened, her tone sharp. "It sings of the stars, Edward. It is older than memory itself." Daniel stepped closer, his voice smooth, "Then let him chase the song and lose himself in it." Edward glared, his voice like fire, "I will not lose. I will understand." Clark shouted, his fear drowning him, "You already lost yourself to obsession." Eleanor whispered, almost reverently, "He is not lost. He is bound." Edward pressed his hand against the glowing stone, his body trembling with unseen energy. The air shivered, the walls humming like a great heart. Clark covered his ears, screaming, "It is madness." Edward's jaw tightened, whispering, "No, it is truth breaking free." The chamber walls cracked as if awakened, fragments falling to the ground with heavy thuds. Edward shouted, "It lives!" Clark staggered back, his voice breaking, "It dies with us if you do not stop." Eleanor whispered, her eyes fixed on the tablet, "It is not death, it is remembrance." Daniel's calm expression curved into a cold grin, or destruction disguised as remembrance. Edward lifted the tablet higher, glowing symbols spiraling up the walls. He said, "The truth cannot be chained." Clark screamed, "Then it will chain us all in ruin." Eleanor's voice quivered, torn between awe and dread. "Edward, you walk a path no one returns from." Edward whispered, "Then let me be the first to return." The chamber shook violently, dust and stone raining down, the sound echoing like thunder. Daniel leaned back, amused, as Clark fell to his knees in despair. The shaking subsided, leaving silence as heavy as a tomb. The tablet dimmed, its glow fading into Edward's trembling hands. Edward whispered. It took its voice back. Clark muttered, broken. It nearly took ours too. Eleanor's tone was hushed, eyes wet with emotion. The tragedy is not death. It is silence that follows revelation. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp, and silence is the victor every time. Edward's jaw clenched, whispering, not while I breathe. Clark's despair boiled into anger. You call this breathing, you drag us deeper into graves. Eleanor touched the wall softly, whispering, the chamber weeps with us. Edward tightened his grip on the tablet, his face pale yet determined. This is only the beginning. The truth waits deeper still. Daniel's smirk returned, his words a blade, and it will cut you when you find it. The silence pressed like a closing hand, suffocating yet unyielding. The canyon rumbled as if the desert itself prepared for war. Edward held the faded tablet close, whispering, it fights to keep its secrets buried. Clark shouted, and yet you still claw at its coffin. Eleanor's eyes glistened as she stared at the swirling winds. Her voice steady. The desert answers when called, but it punishes arrogance. Daniel smirked, his tone calm. Then Edward will be punished most of all. Edward's eyes narrowed. You speak of punishment, but it is truth that punishes liars. Clark stepped forward, trembling, and it is obsession that punishes fools. The wind roared louder, scattering sand into their eyes. Eleanor whispered, it listens. The keeper is close. Daniel chuckled, then let him come. I have nothing to fear. Edward lifted the tablet high, shouting, let him face me, for truth does not bow. They emerged into a vast open plain where a colossal monolith stood, half buried in sand. Edward whispered, here lies the heart of it all. Clark muttered bitterly, here lies the grave you're digging for us. Eleanor stared upward, awe breaking through her mask. It is not man's work, it is something greater. Daniel smiled slyly, or perhaps it is simply stone that men worship. Edward clenched his fists, his voice hard. No stone hums with memory unless it holds truth. Clark groaned. Then this truth will kill us faster than silence. Eleanor whispered softly, it remembers, Edward. That is why it still stands. Edward touched the monolith, his voice trembling, then let it remember me too. The ground shook violently, humming as if the monolith breathed, dust swirling into the night sky. The monolith pulsed with deep blue light, casting eerie shadows across the sand. Edward shouted, it awakens! Clark cried out, and it will bury us alive. Eleanor whispered sharply, no, it reveals. Daniel stepped closer, his smile widening at last, the truth we all crave. Edward glared, truth is not yours, Daniel. Daniel's tone was smooth, truth belongs to no one, it chooses. Clark gasped, then let it choose silence. Edward lifted the tablet high, his body shaking as the monolith's glow aligned with its symbols. Eleanor whispered, it responds to you, Edward. You are bound to it now. Clark staggered back, his fear tearing into rage. Then he is cursed, not chosen. Daniel laughed coldly. Perhaps cursed and chosen are the same. The monolith thundered, a low hum rattling their bones. A blinding light burst from the monolith, engulfing them in shimmering waves of energy. Edward shouted, it speaks through light. Clark screamed, it kills through fire. Eleanor whispered, awestruck, it remembers us now. Daniel stepped closer into the glow, smirking, and it judges us all. Edward clenched his jaw, his voice fierce, then let it judge me worthy. Clark fell to his knees, covering his eyes, muttering, no man survives judgment like this. Eleanor tilted her head, whispering, perhaps survival is not its gift, but revelation. Daniel's laughter echoed, sharp and cruel, revelation is a knife, and Edward begs to bleed. Edward lifted the tablet higher into the beam, his body trembling as the light surged stronger. The monolith's hum grew unbearable, rattling the very air around them. The light dimmed, leaving silence broken only by Edward's ragged breath. His hands shook as the tablet cracked further, glowing faintly. Edward whispered, "It chose me." Clark shouted, "It cursed you, Edward. Look at yourself." Eleanor's gaze darkened, her voice low. "It bound you to its memory. You are no longer only yourself." Daniel chuckled coldly, "A puppet of stone and stars. How fitting." Edward turned on him, eyes blazing. "No, I am the voice it awakened." Clark stumbled forward, his anger choking him. "You are not the Edward I followed into this desert." Eleanor whispered, "He is more, but also less." Edward raised the tablet, his voice trembling yet firm. "This is the cost, and I accept it." Daniel smirked, his tone sharp as a blade. "Then your end has already begun." The desert wind howled as if echoing Daniel's words. The desert fell silent as the monolith's glow faded into a faint ember, but the air still hummed with unspent energy. Edward's hands trembled as he whispered, "The truth lives in me now." Clark's voice cracked, "It lives to kill you." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her tone hushed. "No, it binds him to a path none of us can follow." Daniel smirked, his tone like poisoned honey, "Then let him walk it alone." Edward glared. "I do not walk alone, Daniel. I carry every silence, every whisper carved in stone." Clark stepped forward, tears burning in his eyes. "Edward, this truth is no salvation. It is a grave that walks with you." Eleanor's gaze flickered between them, unreadable, as she whispered, "And yet, graves have always been the keepers of memory." The monolith pulsed faintly, as though agreeing, while the night sky stretched above them heavy with stars. They moved into the shadow of the monolith, where the air thickened with tension. Edward said, "This ends tonight." Clark shook his head, muttering, "Endings are all you bring." Eleanor's voice was soft, "The ending is only another doorway." Daniel stepped forward, his smile sharp, "And I decide who walks through it." Edward's eyes blazed, "You decide nothing. The truth already chose." Clark shouted, "Then it chose wrong." Eleanor's voice wavered, "Truth never chooses wrong, only hard paths." Daniel chuckled, "Or it chooses pawns." "Edward is no seeker. He is its puppet." Edward growled, "Better puppet of truth than master of lies." Clark slammed his fist into the sand, tears streaming. "We will all die here because of this." Eleanor whispered, "Or live forever in memory." The monolith hummed louder, its presence vibrating like a drumbeat of inevitability. The air crackled as a fissure split open in the ground near them, glowing with molten light. Edward whispered, "It opens the last veil." Clark stumbled back, screaming, "It opens our graves." Eleanor's tone sharpened, "No, it reveals what was buried beneath all silence." Daniel laughed coldly, "Finally, the core of truth and destruction." Edward stepped toward the fissure, his voice iron. "I will step into it, no matter the cost." Clark grabbed his arm, desperate. "You will kill us all." Edward tore free, his eyes burning. "Then let my death reveal what your fear never could." Eleanor whispered, "Every seeker pays with their blood, Edward." Daniel smirked, "And tonight, you will pay in full." The ground shook violently as the glow rose higher, consuming the shadows around them, pulling them into its call. The fissure widened, its glow rising like a storm of light. Edward lifted the tablet, shouting, "Truth demands to be free." Clark cried, "It demands our lives." Eleanor whispered, "It demands sacrifice." Daniel's voice cut like steel, "Then let him bleed for it." Edward glared, "You speak as though you are not part of this, Daniel." Daniel's smile grew cruel, "Because I am not. I deceived you all. The truth is mine to keep, not yours to reveal." Clark gasped, "You planned this all along." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, whispering, "Deceiver." Edward stepped forward, his voice unshaken, "You may betray, Daniel, but betrayal cannot silence truth." Daniel snarled, "Then let it destroy you instead." The light burst upward like a pillar into the sky, shaking the earth beneath their feet, demanding their reckoning. The storm of light subsided, leaving the desert in hushed silence. Edward fell to his knees, the tablet shattered in his hands, glowing fragments fading into sand. Edward whispered, "The truth. It is free now." Clark wept openly, crying, "And it took everything from us." Eleanor's voice trembled, "Not everything. It left us memory." Daniel staggered, his smirk gone, his voice bitter. "Memory is ash when truth burns away." Edward raised his head, his eyes hollow yet resolute. "Ash or not, it will not be silenced again." Clark shook with grief, whispering, "You doomed us, Edward." Eleanor touched Edward's shoulder softly, whispering, "He gave us revelation." Daniel turned, walking into shadows, muttering, "And revelation destroys more than lies ever could." The desert wind rose once more, carrying whispers across the dunes, as stars above blinked coldly at the price of truth.